Welcome to the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to get into graduate school. For the past 10 years, I've been helping undergraduate students get into top graduate programs in their field, and I'm really excited to share this information with you too.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to have a special guest today, someone I know because she was a former UCSB McNair Scholar, so I'm so happy that she's here today. So today we're going to cover the topic of what it's like being a woman of color in the STEM field. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started by sharing her bio. So our guest today is Yanelyn Perez, who is currently a first-year PhD student studying wildlife disease ecology at the University of Maryland, College Park. Prior to grad school, she earned her bachelor's degree at UCSB, surprise, surprise, studying zoology and researching disease ecology. So I figured we could start with you telling us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, your background, what motivated you or inspired you to pursue research in grad school in a STEM field. So all about you, whatever you want to share.
Thank you. So originally when I was very little, I grew up all my life in Los Angeles, so very concrete-y. I grew up in apartments. We didn't really have that much outdoor stuff. And even like, it's kind of crazy because in the East Coast, it's so green. So the kids here are having a good time, I guess. But I've always really loved animals and plants. And I would spend like most of my time outside when I was little, and I would collect like cockroaches and like ladybugs and roly-polies because I thought they were really cool. Like we weren't allowed to have pets in my apartment. So, I really liked animals and I really liked looking at the different plants. And, I'm the daughter of immigrants and my dad is from El Salvador. And when I was little, he would always tell me about all the different animals he'd see, all the different trees he'd climb. So growing up, he's always tried to give me as much outdoor space as he had when he was little, even though it's pretty limited in Los Angeles. So, we'd go to the beach on the weekends, we'd go to the park, we'd go like out on little walks to see birds and stuff. And that's kind of a lot because he worked 6 out of 7 days a week. So essentially on his day off, he would take me outside, which for most people, they would just rest and, catch up on things with their families and stuff. So I'm really grateful and I acknowledge that most of my interest came because of that like effort he put into me just cultivating that interest. And even when I was little too, like if he had a pay raise, he would get me like a Crocodile Hunter DVD or something with like Animal like Planet. So it was very cultivated ever since I was little. And I'm very grateful that I still had that environment to grow it, even though Los Angeles and the suburbs and the city aren't really a naturey place in general. So growing up, again, being the daughter of immigrants, because my mother's also an immigrant, I didn't really know that many job aspects either. So, I was kind of told like a lawyer or a doctor. Pick which one you want.
They're like, you're smart, just become a doctor, and they mean medical doctor.
Exactly. It's like, okay, you're better at math, so let's be a doctor. Let's aim for doctor. So I didn't really know there was like many different options for jobs. And so I grew up thinking like, well, if I'm going to be a doctor, I should be an animal doctor because I like animals, so why not? So all my life, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian just because I didn't really know there was options outside of that. So I went to high school in a magnet system, which I'm really grateful for too. So it was adjacent to the Los Angeles Zoo. So I was able to do like animal husbandry classes, zoology classes, environmental studies, ecology. It was a 2-hour bus ride from my house though.
What was the specialization of that magnet school, just out of curiosity?
It's ecology and environmental sciences.
Oh, that's so interesting. I went to a math science technology magnet high school. So just
oh my gosh.
which is why I'm still very good at math. Science, I don't know.
Queens. No, but yeah, it was like a 2-hour bus ride and like everyone told me like, you're not going to like it. I was like, nah, I'm going to like it. I know I'm going to like it. So in that like magnet, I kind of discovered there's more options because we had like Earth Days, and we would invite speakers who had different careers in environmental science and ecology. And still I was like, oh, I guess I still want to be a vet because these are more like people involved in everything. And then I finally talked to a vet technician. And I realized I probably would be really bad at it because I'm really emotional when it comes to like animals. And it sounded like a lot of emotional work in accordance to being with the vet, because you have to handle, you know, your patients. You have to handle if you lose an animal, you have to handle talking to the family of the lost patient, or, you know, breaking bad news. And I was terrified of that. And then I kind of had an existential crisis because I was like, oh, if I don't want to be a vet, what am I doing? And blah, 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 blah. And I remember telling my dad this, and he was like, you know, you should be a scientist. And I was like, I don't know if that's an option. He's like, I think you would look good on a lab coat. Like, you're smart. Like, you
He
can
was
use that
onto
brain.
something.
He was onto something. But it was funny because I never considered it at that point. And, you know, I don't know if he knows the full implications of being like a researcher or a scientist. It's just like, yeah, they like go out, answer questions. You like answering questions. You're a curious guy. Like, I see like a scientist being a good fit for you. I was like, oh, you're crazy. Like, I don't know. And then my senior year of high school, when I was trying to decide what colleges I wanted to go to, I was like, oh, maybe I should kind of figure out like what other job paths there are, because, you know, I don't want to be in debt for a degree that I don't know if I'm going to go into. And especially being in high school and thinking that young, like I was just an overthinker. And I remember talking to a teacher in high school, and he was like, well, maybe like you should go into research. And I was like, I don't know what that means. like biology labs. He was like, what kind of? It's like, he explained to me the basics of research. It's like, you know, you find a topic and you want to expand on it, and you do a bunch of studies to try and expand on it, and you kind of create more knowledge for the collective good. I was like, well, I guess that sounds better than like a 9-to-5 job and like an office job and stuff. So I decided then that maybe I should look more into research. But again, I never had like the guidance of like, oh, like a master's or a PhD. Like, I just thought you go into college and then you come out a researcher.
Hey, that's more than I knew at that time. I didn't even know about research in high school at all. I didn't find out until like the end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year.
So I was very fortunate that in my freshman year of college, I found a research lab with stuff I was super interested in. Like, I did frog research all throughout my 4 years of college, and I know you know that. I love frogs. And it was a very wonderful blessing. And I don't think I would be where I'm at without that lab, or without the people I met in that lab. So the postdoc I work under during my first project, she was also a first generation student. And I remember telling her, I was like, you know, I want to get into research, but I don't really know the implications of that. Or I don't know if like I have enough money for that. Because, you know, I also hear like grad school, like PA school, like post-bacs, all these different things. I'm like, oh, that sounds like money. I don't have money. And she explained to me the whole system. Like, she was like, you know, don't feel bad. Like, I was in your position when I was in college. If you want to ask stupid questions, or questions you think are stupid, ask me. If you think these questions are like redundant, or like you think that they're easy answers, still ask me. I know it's a scary field for you, and I want to be the person to like guide you where to go. So because of her, I realized that I could do a PhD and that it's funded, that I don't have to pay out of pocket essentially. And, you know, I was like, well, you need a master's. And she was like, no, you don't. Like, just go straight into a PhD program. And typically, too, if you want to get a master's, you can find funded masters. And she kind of went into like all of the logistics of it. And like, this is what you would need to get into like grad school. You need research experience, you need connections with your professors, you need this and that. And I felt very fortunate, because I feel you typically don't get that type of guidance when you're like a woman of color in STEM, you know?
That's what
like,
I've heard as well. Yeah.
You don't, like, especially in a school like UCSB, which is like super big. It's a huge research institution, very credible, very name-worthy. It's just very competitive within. So it's really hard to get those resources. And typically, you know, disadvantaged groups aren't going to get that. So I feel very extremely fortunate to have had that since my freshman year, and kind of know what I needed to do to get into grad school. And then also the McNair Scholars. So I think, yeah, being like, that's how like my interest cultivated in research. It like was throughout my whole life and kind of just cultivated and like defined itself in college, which it's great.
I was going to say, it's so interesting because you actually started talking about what I was going to ask next, which is like, what was it like being a woman of color in STEM as an undergrad? You kind of started to talk about how thankfully you had good support. But also if you could kind of expand a little bit more on that and then tell us then maybe the difference between what it was like being a woman of color in STEM at UCSB and now in grad school at University of Maryland, because they're two very different places, spaces, and two very different experiences. And even like your identity from undergrad to grad school, being a grad student is so different. So I'm just curious what you've learned. Because you remind us what year you're in grad school.
I'm in my first year still.
Oh my gosh. So but you're just like fresh after, you know, in your second semester. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I feel like a fish out of water.
Yeah. Frog out of water.
Great question. Yeah. As an undergrad, I struggled so badly with imposter syndrome, and I didn't even know that was a term until my second year. So it's kind of like the thing where you don't see yourself being represented in the field. And you know, this is just one of my biggest gripes with STEM and with life sciences, because specifically with life sciences like ecology, biology, all those fun life-related stuff, the majority of, you know, people in there are actually women identifying or women. So it's kind of funny to see like, oh, I still feel underrepresented in a field that's mostly dominated by women.
It's funny, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's typically just because it's mostly white women who dominate the field. So it's, as an undergrad and you're kind of navigating out of the weeder classes into like the upper div classes, there's never really been a time where I saw myself being represented fully in any of those classes. Like the only time I saw like a bunch of diversity in the STEM classes happened to be freshman year, the first semester or like quarter of chem. You know, because everyone wants to be a doctor. Everyone is trying to get into the bio major. And then by your second quarter, the second part of it, more than half of the class drops.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a hard class. And again, it has to do with resources as well. So if you went to a really good high school that taught you how to like prep for classes, prep for tests, like built up your study like repertoire, you're going to do good. You're going to see all these materials. You're going to know how to study. You're going to know how to like tackle it. But if you really didn't, then you're kind of at a disadvantage because you have to figure that out on yourself. And most people I knew, and myself included, had jobs. So I saw and knew people who would spend maybe like 7 hours a day studying the material they needed. And of course, they came out with an A. Other people I knew who had 2 jobs, who would work back to back, maybe studied an hour or 2 a day, would barely get C's. So it's very disheartening because, you know, you're in a college setting and you would think everyone has equal opportunities to these resources. But, you know, going further and further into that biology, like course chain, I didn't really see any other, or a lot of women of color, you know, saw a lot of white women, saw a lot of white men, saw, you know, a lot of Asian diversity too. But, you know, in terms of like Black and, you know, Latino bodies, you really don't see much. And I think it's kind of a shame that, you know, our population isn't really getting supported throughout like STEM.
It's wild that you say that because at UCSB, it's considered an HSI, a Hispanic Serving Institution. And even then, even though it's an HSI, there's still not enough representation in, especially in STEM. And so you have like double marginalization or multiple forms of, because it's not only being, you know, a person of color, but also being a woman. So it's like, maybe you might have found some Black and brown men in your classes, but even fewer folks who were like you. Like
I remember, since I was a zoology major, for one of my first upper div zoology classes, it was a class of like 15, right? It was super tiny, which tiny for Santa Barbara standards.
Yeah, that is small. Well, for grad school, no.
For grad school, no. But, you know, I kind of looked around the room and I realized I was the only Latina woman there. And that shocked me. And I like, it was like a random day in the quarter where I was just like taking notes, and I looked around the room and I was like, huh, this is a little suspicious.
And then you feel like you stick out. Because I remember when I was an undergrad, I wasn't in STEM, but I was in a predominantly like white discipline. And I would go into my classes and I would count. I would see like, is there someone
I
who's
counted
brown, black or brown?
And from there, I kept counting in my upper division.
I always counted, and sometimes that's when I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one.
Yeah,
I stick out. Everything I say, they're gonna be judging me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think part of like my reason for like not really speaking out in classes was just because I felt super shy. I was like I had some experiences in high school where people were like, oh, like she's Mexican, she can't do math or something like that, like to my face. I'm not even Mexican. Salvadorian and Honduran.
Gosh.
Yeah, so like stuff like that kind of like scared me from talking, because I don't want to like speak in a class of 15. And again, this is like the imposter syndrome kicking in, like I don't deserve to be here, I don't see myself here, which again, it's like a representation thing. So I would just be like, I know this could be a good question, but I'm just gonna wait until after class so nobody else hears me, because what if it's a stupid question, and what if people are like, oh, why is she even here, or something like that, and that would terrify me for some reason. So yeah, as an undergrad, it was pretty harsh on the classes, like when you're like further into like your discipline and major, because you just wouldn't see yourself represented, and it kind of just like feeds into the imposter syndrome. And I know that's mostly like a lot of women of color face imposter syndrome, because again, these spaces weren't necessarily created or sustained for us. Exactly. So we kind of end up here and we're just like, am I supposed to be here? Should I speak on this? Should I do this and that? So, it's, as an undergrad, it's just disheartening at times. And then again, going back to, the support system, that's what kind of got me through everything, because, the more people you talk to who are in like, these situations where, you're either in STEM or like a majority white discipline and stuff like that, you see you're not alone in your thoughts, and it makes you feel a lot better because you don't feel crazy, you don't think like, oh, I'm overreacting to this or I'm doing that. It's like, no, my friend is also thinking this, and my other friend is also thinking this. And, that's why I really loved McNair Scholars too, because everyone felt that too.
Yes.
So it was super easy to talk to people and be like, do you guys feel that, or is that just me? And you feel less alone. And in terms, you just feel more supported, because then your friends would be like, oh, like, no, just talk. Like, if you have a good question, like, what's stopping you? And yeah, so basically as an undergrad, being in like, a predominantly white and, non-Black or Latino space, it felt disheartening at times, but I guess having the proper support system really did help me get through it. And, wasn't my main focus. It was extremely difficult to like stay and maintain my grades and do all these things, especially as an undergrad trying to get into grad school. You're expected to do research, you're expected to form connections with your professors. And at the same time, if you don't have support from your family, you're expected to work and you're expected to do this and that. So I was very stressed, but at the end of the day, I was really grateful for everything that came along my way, which are the people and, all the opportunities.
That leads us into now you're at Maryland, or you're in Maryland, you're at University of Maryland. And now I'm curious, because that first year is rough for everybody. We actually recently had an alumni panel come in and talk to our McNair Scholars. Some of them were in their second year, some of them were in your cohort. And everybody was saying like, I remember it was so hard my first quarter, and then my first year, it was rough. And so I can only imagine how things have been for you. So I'm just curious if you can just share a little bit more what you've learned just from having survived your first semester and now trying to kind of manage and wrap up your second one. Is it done? Mm-hmm. It's not done yet, right?
Next week it's done. So
oh my gosh, you're about to wrap up your first year.
Yeah, I'm basically done with my first year. Oh my God. So yeah, as an undergrad, like I was stressed out about the spaces. I was stressed out about like speaking, and I have the support system. Currently, it's even more difficult because I haven't met people from my cohort, essentially, other than Zoom calls. And I would want to assume that, first year of grad school is extremely hard regardless. But I think being virtual as your entire first year is insanely difficult for me. And typically, again, when you're like entering high school or you're entering undergrad from high school, this is the time you develop like your study methods, your effective methods. You start to discover, am I a morning person? Am I a night person? Where do I work best in, like outside my house or this and that? It kind of blurred the lines from undergrad going into grad school, just because it's a different field all in all. Like there's different expectations. So, I've been TA in my first two like semesters. So being in charge of handling lesson materials for students, and then being in charge of figuring out where I want my research to go, reading 15 papers or more, like on a weekend when I'm supposed to be resting, and, struggling in classes that I find extremely difficult. And it's really hard to kind of make the spaces where I have like a support system, just because I haven't been really able to talk to anyone. And I'm actually really grateful for Maryland, because our biology cohort is actually super diverse.
That's good.
So yeah, it's a very nice difference from what I was used to in Santa Barbara. Even the undergrad students are much more like, it's a huge diversity, like who's in like the biology and ecology classes. But in terms of like my specific cohort, there's still some diversity issues, but I have been able to find other Latino women who are actually like in my same like concentration, who are
That's
actually
awesome.
ecologists.
Wow.
I have someone on my committee who is actually a professora.
That's great.
Yeah, and I talk to her so much. Like I'm like, oh, did you have issues with like this in your first year? And she's super helpful and like a source, like a nice source of resources and advice. And again, she's on my committee, so I always like bug her and stuff. But
you're not bugging her, by the way.
I know. I feel like I ask her some dumb questions sometimes. But she's awesome. I really appreciate having her. And my PI is also a woman. So sometimes when I'm having like issues, like, feminine issues, I can talk to her and be like, hey, like I'm feeling really sick today and I really can't come in, or, I feel really overwhelmed and like everything that's like coming my way just feels like it's a lot. She is really sympathetic with that. And, I have like the beginnings of a really good support system. I just haven't been able to fully flesh it out because I haven't been able to meet anyone in person. Or
it takes a while, even if it had been in person, it takes
Really?
a while to build community, to find people. I mean, I feel like I'm still trying to build community as PCSB, and it's been 5 years or 4 years. So it takes a while. Don't worry, I'm not saying it's going to take you that long. But I remember my first few years of grad school, I didn't have that support system set up. And so I went out and kind of tried to find it or build it. And it wasn't until I was actually done with coursework that I really started to form those support systems. So you can get a head start as early as possible because you know better. So I didn't.
No, I feel
it sounds like you at least have at least one cheerleader, which is that person on your committee. Yeah.
Yeah. And like my advisor too, because she's very like, sometimes I'll tell her like, hey, I feel really overwhelmed. And specifically last semester, I had a family member pass away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And yeah, I was very distressed. And I, reached out to her like, hey, I know I was supposed to do this project, but I really need a week. I want to go back to California, be with my family. I know it's really inconvenient, but she like reassured me nothing's like, your personal matters are not inconvenient. Your, worries, your stress are valid. Take the time you need. We will figure out what we need to do when you come back.
That's good. Yeah.
And, I also like messaged my the department head and the concentration head, like, is it okay if I take some time off the semester? Everyone was super helpful. Like, yeah, take your time. Just make sure you get your TA stuff in order. But if that's not an issue, if your PI knows, like, go ahead, take the time. Let us know when you come back. Let us know how you're feeling. So the department itself is super supportive and had the beginnings of a nice community.
Yeah.
So I would say that from undergrad, I kind of knew that I needed a support group. So going into grad school is something I knew I needed. And that's why the program was really appealing to me to begin with too, because most of the grad students said they felt super supported by the concentration head or by their advisors or by the other students in the cohort. So that was my main focus.
That's why I tell students, like when they're looking to apply to grad school and trying to come up with a grad list, a lot of times most people are not going to get into every program they apply to. And a lot of times if you only get into a couple, I only got into one PhD program, but a lot of times it's like, it's a fit thing. Like you will get in where it's a good fit. And so it sounds like you are where you were supposed to go.
Yeah.
In terms of support and fit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I only got into one program because I messed up some of my application
You did not mess up. Stop.
It happened.
All you need is one. And once you get that PhD, no, it's going to be like, hey, how many grad programs did you get into?
I know.
I'm still a doctora, even with just one acceptance. So
no, but that's the thing. Like, I think it's crazy how like it all worked out, because at the time it's like, well, I really like Maryland because the postdoc who was my mentor my freshman year actually did the same program.
Wow.
So she was the one who was like, you know, it's a very good program. Do not go with my advisor. Please do not go with my advisor. But everything else about the program is amazing. And you could thrive if you find another advisor. And I was like, okay, stay clear from her past advisor. I hear that. And then, yeah, I applied to like 2 other schools and I kind of messed up. And one of them was a funding issue. So the professor was like, yeah, you're going to get in, you're going to do that. And here's a lesson. Nobody knows if you're going to get in because funding is always a mysterious thing.
It really is. Yeah.
Because he was so positive, like the professor in Michigan, who was like, yeah, you're going to like be like my only student studying this system, which is going to be great. You have a lot of background here. Like, I'm very excited to have you. Like, you're going to love it here. Blah, 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 blah. And then I got a rejection letter and a follow-up email from him saying like he really vouched for me. He really did everything he could, but they just didn't have enough funding to bring me in. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I was hoping to go to Michigan. And then Maryland came through. And then I talked a bit more with the postdoc and with some of the current students. I was like, wait, this is actually a really good fit. I think everything worked out the way it was supposed to.
Exactly. You never know.
Yeah.
So it's so funny. So now it sounds like you said it's like you're developing like the beginning of what may be the support system for you that will help you keep going. So I'm wondering right now, fresh out of completing right about to complete your first year, what continues to motivate you? And I know we're getting close to wrapping up. So what continues to motivate you? And if there's any advice that you could give others, maybe there are some listeners who are current undergrads, maybe they kind of see themselves in you. They're like, oh, I'm also in a STEM field. I'm also a woman of color. But I'm afraid, or I feel not represented, or I feel like I don't belong. Like, what advice would you give them? Or like, what helps you keep going essentially?
So typically when I used to mentor students at UCSB too, I would tell them like, you know, do like, it sounds really cheesy, but do what you really want to do. You know, like if you are studying like biology because you feel like you need to study biology, you're not gonna like, you're subconsciously not setting yourself up to succeed because it's not something you want to do. So if you want to go into research, like you should know that that's something you want to do. Everything that comes with it, you know, like the failures, the extensive nights not sleeping, or, you know, the feeling that you don't belong either, and like kind of overcoming that, understanding yourself on a better emotional level. Like research is a lot of stuff. So if you know you're up to it, like it will happen. And I mean, the thing that inspires me and like motivates me is just my basic love for nature, you know, like I grew up all my life, you know, wanting to do stuff with nature and wanting to be with animals, wanting to be with flowers and the bees and all of that stuff. And, you know, research is an opportunity for me to do that. Like my study system's in Italy with flowers in the mountains.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, I know, it's really nice. And, you know, as an undergrad, like I went across California getting frogs, which is also a dream of mine too. So, you know, research for me is an opportunity to go out and explore these feelings I've had ever since I was little. And, you know, I was fortunate to find my interest when I was little. Some people might find them in their last year of college or like post-college, or, you know, are still finding them. And I think that's totally valid. But, you know, once you find the one thing that you really like and you can explore it, like, I think that's just what keeps motivating you. Like, there's many times this semester where I was like, am I even like fit to be here? Like everything's getting thrown at me. I don't really have that good of a support system yet. Like, my classes, my TA-ship, my research, my write-ups, my grants, like, I don't know if I can do anything. Like, I don't know if I'm fit to be a grad student. And then I would remember, like, these are all hurdles. You really like what you're doing. So, it seems really bad at the moment. And it is bad at the moment. Like, do not underestimate it. But it will pass as all things pass. And
exactly. Oh my gosh, I was about to say that. Yes.
it always passes. And it feels like the end of the world. Like, it feels like your chest is tightening up. Like, you get an email from your committee and you're like, oh God.
I remember those, so anxiety inducing, like, they're gonna
you get an email from your advisor and you're like, oh my God, not now. Or like, you get students saying like, oh, I think you misgraded this, and it's like 10 emails at a time, and you're just like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed. And I just remind myself, like, you're here to study wildlife, you're here to study diseases, you're here so that you can get a degree and hopefully keep doing that in the future. And that's what like keeps motivating me. And then also like being called doctora. I want to have that.
Soon enough. Trust me, it's gonna fly by before you know it.
But that's the thing. It's like, I feel like my sole interest motivates me. And also like, I'm hoping to be a professor or like, something along those lines. Hopefully, cross our fingers if the job market isn't completely.
And that's the thing, you have options. You can become a professor, you can become a researcher, like, and within the researcher realm, there's like it's not just at the university, it's for industry, companies, nonprofits, like the whole world needs researchers right now. So I think you'll be good.
Yeah, but my thing is like, I want to be in a space where I can inspire like people who were like me in undergrad, who were scared because they didn't really see themselves. They didn't see themselves in the professors. They didn't see themselves in the grad students. They didn't see themselves as researchers. And I had like a few experiences as undergrads where I was very like directly reminded of that, like I had an experience at my job where our boss picked out a white crew member from the shift I was leading and said, this is what an ecologist looks like. And I remember that like struck a nerve.
Wow.
Talked to him after. I was like, why wasn't I chosen to be the ecologist? He's like, well, because she like has more experience. I was like, I have more experience. I have more experience. Why didn't you choose me? The kids that you were saying this to come from a Latino school. They all speak Spanish. And you chose a white woman to say, this is what an ecologist looks like.
I'm like, is that a micro or a macro aggression?
Yeah. And I was just like, why didn't you choose me? I speak Spanish. I'm Latina. And I'm an ecologist. Like, I am an ecologist at this point. Why didn't you choose me? And he was like, well, I think she was a better fit for like the example. And I remember thinking like, this is going to scar those kids, because some of those kids are going to be like, I want to study animals. And they're going to think back to that trip and be like, it was a white woman, not the brown women who were on the shift. It was the white women.
And we know this because we were those kids and we saw those people. And
exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's like thing with representation. So another thing that motivates me is that I want to be in a position where I can be representation for students like that. Like, I want people to be like, oh, like, I'm thinking about being a researcher, and could see someone who looks like them actively doing the job and have the inspiration like, oh, well, she can do it. Like, I could do it too. And that's like, again, the whole thing with like representation in the field, because you can't really see yourself succeed. You can't really see yourself in a space if you just don't see yourself. So that's my second motivation.
I love that.
Those macro aggressions.
And I mean, that's the sad reality, is that that's just one of many. And it's just like the one thing about, as you kind of advance further, you'll learn to better navigate those and to kind of advocate for yourselves. And eventually you'll be in certain positions of power that you'll be able to advocate for yourself and for others. So it's kind of nice to be able to like pave the path and lift others as you climb,
Yeah. And that's why I'm also very excited about grad school too, because again, like postdocs and grad students like helped me get to where I am, and so does the professors too. But mostly the grad students and postdocs had a hand in hand, like teaching me research, he's teaching me this and that, guiding me to certain things. And I want to do that for students as well, especially, underrepresented students, because we don't get enough resources. And if I can provide that for a couple of students while I'm here for 6 years, like, I feel like that would really just be amazing. So that's also another motivation for me to get through this coursework, get through managing very difficult things at the same time, and just learning to be the best version of myself so I can provide this output and this help for people who want to go into research who don't have the resources and are looking for them. So
I'm really proud of you.
I'm hoping that I can pull it off.
Oh, you will. You will. You've got a strong enough, reason, and like your heart is in it. I can sense it. So I have no doubt. I firmly believe in you.
I hope.
So
the grad school doesn't wipe me out.
You are already doing all of the right things. You're kind of advocating for yourself. You're reaching out. You're asking for help. You're developing a support system. All those things are going to help you get by. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess for the last part of your question, like what advice I have for undergrads, honestly, like what I've been kind of mentioning is just a support group, like you can do whatever you want to do. Like I was told many times my freshman year to switch out of my majors by professors.
You're not the only one. I hear that time and time again among our McNair STEM students.
I was told by my advisor that I weaseled, or like the bio major advisor, that I weaseled my way into a class. I was told by my chem professors to switch the majors because I got a C on a midterm. There's so many things that are gonna, be obstacles, and it sucks that we have to experience them the most. Like you're gonna see your classmates succeed while you're still struggling, and you're gonna wonder what's wrong with you, and you're gonna wonder like what's this and that, like why can't I do that, or why can't I get an A? I've been trying so hard, and it's super disheartening. But at the end of the day, like you can do whatever you want to do. Like if you fail a class, you fail a class. I failed 5 classes as an undergrad. And I'm still in a PhD program.
And look at you. Nice. I love that.
Yeah, like, failure isn't the end. You fail a class, pick yourself up, keep going. You find that you have like difficulties in one thing specifically, go out and look for help with that. Like, again, having the support system is like honestly what made the 4 years so much easier for me, because I can go to my friends and be like, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do. And they would be like, well, have you tried going to like, CLAS for this class? I'm like, oh, I didn't know it offered it.
Yeah,
or did you try?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do like, have you talked to the professor? Have you reached out to the grad students? Like, you're going to struggle. And that's just the thing with all STEM classes, especially when you're not resourced enough to do well in them. You're just going to struggle. And that's the reality of it. Everyone struggles. And I think that's also a thing I needed to hear too, because if you think you're struggling on your own, it feels heavier for some reason. You feel like you're not doing well. Like,
or you personalize it. You think there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But when you talk to people, when you realize how everyone is struggling, like it's just some people have more resources than you do. And once you can acknowledge that, I feel like you will be able to succeed. And like, do not listen to people when they say like, you're not going to be able to pass this, or you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. Like, you're the only person who can say that to yourself, like, and I had like experiences where my boss at work would also say like, oh, I didn't want to promote you because like you didn't come from a good school. And I know you're probably going to struggle in OChem, so I don't want to promote you. And, stuff like that. It's like, I would just let that like fuel the spite in me and just do better, because I'm like, oh, if you think I'm going to do bad, I'm going to do good just to spite you. And
I love that.
I'm a very spiteful person, I guess.
Use it as fuel,
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, it's going to be difficult. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. Like, if you're blessed to have photographic memory, God bless you. But if you need to study relentlessly, like it's going to be really difficult, especially like being a child of immigrants. Your parents aren't going to support you, or, coming from a school that wasn't that great with like developing your study sets, you're going to struggle. So just realizing that you're not alone in the struggle, and that like other people's input doesn't really matter as much as your own input. Like that's what got me through my 4 years, I didn't listen to the weasel comment, or to, my background comment, or switch out of the major comments. Like I said, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to graduate.
I'm like, we should have like a database or repository or some sort of Google form where I can just send it out to all the students who are underrepresented in STEM and have them write in, like type in all the microaggressions, because they stay with, that's the thing about people who make racist, sexist, just ableist, all the things, all those comments to you, is that for them, they just say it in passing, don't think about it. And for you, it's, I still like vividly, like I have a bad memory. But those comments, I remember them verbatim.
Because they like feel your spite. But that's the thing, like I remember all these comments and I remember feeling super awful about them, you know, like again, like you said, when the people make them, they're just making them. They're not thinking twice about the effects they have. But, you know, I also had a friend of mine who was like, well, I'm not going to do good in this class, like our boss said, because, you know, I'm stupid. And I remember being like, wow, that's not true. Why would you say that? She's like, well, he keeps mentioning it, like I didn't go to a good high school, or that, like, you know, like my parents didn't care enough about me to do college tours or stuff. So like, I'm going to assume I'm not going to do good in this class. And that's like a way of like internalizing those comments. And I feel like, you know, you will get those comments a bit throughout your research career, especially being a woman of color. Just wherever field you're at, you're gonna get these comments, and they're gonna be annoying, and they're gonna hurt, and they're gonna make you feel boggled down and everything. But just acknowledging your self-worth, which can take a lot of years to build up, is, you know, it's literally the most effective thing you can have against those comments, which again, you get in turns from having a support system and kind of figuring out how to navigate like this little maze that is like academia, which is awful. But yeah, I remember all of those comments, and there's so many that sometimes like play in the back of my head, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna prove you wrong.
Right. And you have already, and you continue to do it.
Yeah. So, you know, that's just my advice. It's just, you know, believe in what you want to do. And even though it sounds really cheesy, I think it does. It's just the most effective thing, you know, like if you let other people's comments bring you down, if you let an expectation of yourself bring you down, like you're letting it bring you down. And, you know, I think if you want to, there's always different and alternative paths to get where you want to be, you know? So that's just my like recommendation. Just be sturdy like a tree and don't let anything move you around.
You have so many good quotes. Oh my gosh. I might pull out some quotes and use them in the description of this podcast episode, because you just shared so many really good quotes. Oh my goodness. You're full of,
I'm telling you, I'm
much
very heated about this.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I feel like it's always just really difficult just in general. And I feel bad that like people who are gonna be like from similar backgrounds than me have to go through all these issues, you know? And it's just disheartening because, you know, in 10 years, like this issue is still probably gonna exist because I don't see academia or like university policies changing. So it's a very heated topic. And if I can give any sort of like advice or like anything, it just makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much,
yeah.
Yanelyn.
Oh my God, we're at the 145 mark.
Yeah, for sharing, for just being open and honest about your experiences. I know a lot of folks are gonna relate to it and are gonna learn a lot, and also I'm pretty sure they'll be inspired too. If anybody, I don't even know if you have anything like a academic Twitter or anything public. Like if anybody wanted to reach out to you, is there a way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I can leave my email. Like my academic email. I'm supposed to make a academic website soon.
Okay.
I'm terrified of doing that.
Share with me your email. I'll just kind of put it out there as y'all, as the listeners are, if they're interested in reaching out to you, I'll have them email me, gradschoolfemtoring@gmail.com, and then I'll give them your email.
Okay.
That works.
Yeah, I can send you my email. Okay. Hopefully if I do start up the website thing soon, I'll just send you that as well. But
yeah, sounds
I'm
good.
kind of terrified of doing that.
You don't have to. It's, you know, it's early. It's only.
No, my PI is like, you know, you should have a presence. I'm like, oh, I don't wanna.
You know what? I actually just we're working with new grad mentors and offered a position to someone in EEMB on campus, and they have a really cool website. So shoot me an email. I'll send you a link.
Wait, is it Sochi?
Well, Xochitl too, actually. Yeah. Xochitl and this new person. I'm not going to say the name because I'm waiting for them to accept the offer.
Okay.
Xochitl and this new person both have really cool websites. So I'll send them to you. I'll send them your way as samples.
Yeah, thank you.
It's kind of nice to see samples. It reminds me, I have to actually update mine because it's kind of outdated too. But thank you.
Yeah,
Yanelyn.
thank you for having me. It was an honor. And it's really good catching up with you too.
Yes, same.
Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you tune in. You can also support the podcast by donating to my Patreon page, Anchor page, or Venmo account, which is at Grad School Femtoring. If you have questions or episode topics, you can contact me by sending me a DM on Instagram, sending me an email to gradschoolfemtoring@gmail.com, sending me a voice message on Anchor, or sending me a message via my personal website at YvetteMartinezvu.com. Until next time.